Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. Here's a title I want you to remember, The Seventh Victim. It's a novel. Alan Jacobson is the author. It's published by Vanguard Press, and Alan is good enough to stop by. Thanks.
My pleasure.
You know, this is, I suppose, a great thriller of a book, and you don't know what's really going to happen until the very end. But to me, one of the main virtues of the book, besides that, is that it's a book that takes us inside. It's a book, I assume, that required a heck of a lot of research because, for example, you take us inside the FBI's, and I hope I have this right, Behavioral Analysis Unit, and its profiling subsidiary.
Right, that's right. Yeah, heck of a lot.
Has anybody ever been in there before? I mean, who are you?
Occasionally they let people in. They don't let them out, but they let them in.
Tell us about that.
Well, I was very fortunate. This goes back to my background. I was an English major. I have loved English since the 7th grade, but I also wanted to be a chiropractor. I was helped by a chiropractor when I was 14. Okay. Got my English degree, went to chiropractic school. I practiced for a little over 8 years, and then I hurt my wrist, and I had to sell my practice. I'm condensing severely here.
All right.
The bottom line is that during the transition to the new doctor who I sold it to, I was in the office and a call came through from the head of the California Department of Justice. And no, I wasn't in trouble. This was a call to help him. Yet. He wanted a reference on one of my former employees who was studying to be a criminalist. I gave him the reference. I then said, I'm working on the outline for a novel. I have some questions for you. And I was telling him about my main character, who's a criminologist. And he stopped me and he said, no, your character's a criminalist, not a criminologist. And he was very helpful in explaining the difference between the two. And I said, if I have other questions as I get into writing the novel, can I call you back? And he said, absolutely. So a few months later, I called him back and I said, I really need to see the crime lab. Can I come see it? And he said, no. Can't do that because, you could compromise evidence.
Right.
So he said, but you can come and sit in and audit a class on blood spatter pattern analysis. And I thought, well, I didn't care what it was called. I was going to be there. But as it so happens, it was fascinating.
Before or after lunch?
This was, every day before started bright and early, through lunch and the evening. But it was an absolutely fascinating experience. It opened my eyes to the world of forensics. Blood spatter pattern analysis was something I'd never been exposed to before, thank goodness. But it was a tremendous experience. But even more so was that who was in the class? We had FBI agents, sheriffs, investigators, detectives, and criminalists. Well, one day I met one of the FBI agents in the class. We started talking. We hit it off. We remained in contact after the class. We would talk for hours upon hours on the phone about behavioral analysis and profiling. Now, he was a field agent here in California, but he was the liaison to the behavioral analysis unit, the profiling unit in Quantico. It was his career goal to become one of the elite profilers. Now, there were only 8 profilers in the adult crimes division.
How many years ago is this?
This was 1994.
Okay.
And there's still only 8, but there's 24 overall in all the profiling unit divisions. So he was promoted. He invited me out to come see the FBI Academy behind the scenes and the profiling unit behind the scenes, and he didn't have to ask twice.
Did he take you to the place 6 floors down?
Yes.
That you write of in the book?
Yep.
Well, I want to get back to that. The other thing that you take us inside is the doubts that the law enforcement community, if you will, has about profiling. I mean, there's one of your characters who every time the woman who's the profiler brings in some information to the task force, she goes, psychobabble. And I guess she's not alone.
No. What happened was, over the years, during all these years of research that I did with the profiling unit, one of the things I did was I attended their training seminars that they give across the country to local law enforcement communities to educate detectives on what the behavioral analysis unit does, what profiling is, and how it works. Well, early on, many, many years ago now, I would sit in on these seminars, and nobody knew who I was. I was sitting in the audience with the other detectives, and I would hear them talking amongst themselves, saying what a load of bull they thought it was. So the character...
Getting the inside scoop as any good writer would.
That's right, scooping the poop, right.
So you knew going in terms of writing this book, that there was, and there are, I assume, serious doubts in the, quote, law enforcement community about the validity of profiling.
There were. It's not as bad now, because over the years, as I continued attending these programs, I would hear the detectives...
Getting softer.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's not the only two things that this book takes you inside of. Perhaps the most amazing thing it takes you inside of is the mind of a serial killer. And we'll do that when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
The Seventh Victim is the title of today's book. It's a novel. Alan Jacobson is with us. He's the author. The publisher is Vanguard Press. And I must say, Alan, you've gotten some different kind of supporting statements for this book. For example, a fellow by the name of James Patterson, who's described here, New York Times best-selling author of Double Cross and God knows what all else. Quote, Karen Vail, the main character, is as compelling a character as any created by Patricia Cornwell or yours truly. Ooh, The Seventh Victim is packed with neat surprises. Did you have a foot on where were you controlling him from?
Oh boy, that's
amazing.
It was amazing.
It's great too. It's personal, and
it meant a great deal to me, because James Patterson was one of the writers that I read early on when I started writing. Who I would read his material, and I would have to run to my own keyboard and start writing.
Now, he's not the only one on your side. A very, very important medium for this business of book publishing and writing and selling, Library Journal, has made a declaration about your book. What is that?
Well, it just came out. Library Journal has named The Seventh Victim one of their best books of the year, and that's considering 7,000 books that they consider.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
Great. Congratulations. Now, one of the things you take us inside of, besides the FBI and that kind of stuff, is the mind of a serial killer. The Seventh Victim refers to the fact that the serial killer at some point has 7 victims. And you take us into this serial killer's mind before a crime is committed, during the committing of a crime, and after. And I want to tell you, it's chilling. It's chilling. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, I felt that, as with the entire story that I was telling, not only did I want to get into the mind of the profiler and law enforcement and what they go through in a case like this, but I also wanted to show where these killers come from. That was one thing that fascinated me while I was doing those years of research. And I had to wait.
And I suppose we should say at this point that this killer is vicious, brutal in the way he addresses victims.
Right.
Terrible stuff.
Right.
Okay.
And I should emphasize that I am very careful not to go overboard in the blood and gore. I mean, that to me, there's no sense to blood and gore unless it plays a role in the story. So I don't want to give people the wrong impression that it's, just...
No, it's not.
No.
But
it was important to explain where and show, really, in a dramatic fashion, where this killer came from and where these killers emerge from childhood all the way up through the time that they start killing. And the original research, the database that the FBI profiling unit developed on serial killers and why they do what they do, comes from the late 70s, when the founding FBI profilers did interviews with incarcerated serial killers, or a few mass murderers, but basically 36 killers. They interviewed them, and they looked for patterns in their responses, of course, filtering out those responses that were not truthful. But that built the knowledge base, the core of what we know about serial killers today.
Now, the main character in the book is the person that Patterson mentions, Karen Vail, who surprisingly is a woman who is one of these people who does this incredible work. Now, how do you see her? You see her as a feminist, pushy kind of person? I mean, a pioneer in any respect?
Well, yeah, kind of a pioneer, because she is, in the book, she is the first female FBI profiler.
Uh-huh.
And I really did work with the real female FBI profiler.
I saw that in the back in your credits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a tremendous experience working with Agent O'Toole and Agent Safric, her partner. But Agent O'Toole gave me the insight that I needed to understand how a woman fits in, or rather doesn't fit into the profiling unit, and the FBI as a whole.
So her job is then what you might call doubly hard, because on the one hand, she's bringing new science to an investigation, and she's also a woman.
That's exactly right. Doubly hard is absolutely true. And the interesting thing is that she brings things to the table that a male perhaps cannot. For example, when interviewing a killer, there are things that a woman can elicit from these killers that a male cannot, or has to elicit in a different way.
I see. And it becomes a deeper way, a more revealing way.
It can be, yes.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Well, there are some times in The Seventh Victim that you're sure they'll never catch the bad guys because, well, just stay tuned and I'll explain.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. I'm Jim Foster. Alan Jacobson is our guest. His book, The Seventh Victim. Another one of your wonderful but very different quotes from Nelson DeMille. Quote, Alan Jacobson is a hell of a writer, and his lead character, Karen Vail, is a hell of a lady. Tough, smart, funny, and very believable. That's Karen Vail. I don't think it's about you. The Seventh Victim is an impressively researched novel about serial murder packed into a tightly twisting plot. Very scary and very good. This reads like a Nelson DeMille book, and I should know. You get these guys. This is wonderful stuff. I mean, to do an endorsement with a smile is very, very different, and I love it. I love it. Now, there's a lot of great things happening to this book. One, something about movie rights?
Right. We sold the movie rights to an A-list Hollywood producer, the same producers that's doing the Tom Cruise movie next month, Valkyrie.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been working with them very closely on the project as it moves forward.
Good. And then there's something going on your website?
Well, I co-wrote with one of the FBI profilers that I worked all these years with a personal safety booklet. It's 21 pages. It's free through my website, either the7thvictim.com or alanjacobson.com. It's a 21-page booklet on home safety, personal safety, and identity theft prevention. Very, very important information.
Now, getting back to kind of like the research for the book, Robert Ressler, world-renowned FBI profiler, retired, says, as one of the founding fathers of the FBI profiling unit, I can unequivocally state that The Seventh Victim sets a new standard for serial killer novels. Like Silence of the Lambs did 20 years ago, The Seventh Victim redefines the genre and brings it into the 21st century with meticulous research and dead-on accuracy. Alan Jacobson has not only written a gripping, twisting thriller, he's created a must-read book. Now, you can't get any better praise than that from an expert. Did you know this fellow before you sent him the book?
No, I don't know,
you
Robert.
You didn't?
No.
Wow, that's great. That is really, really great. Now, the research and how you got there, we kind of talked about in the first segment. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add to that aspect of this project.
Well, if we had 3 hours, I could. But actually, at my book signing...
I don't want you to read your footnotes.
No. At my book signing on the 18th, I'll go into that.
Okay. Now, the thing that I do want to get back to is I think we just mentioned it in passing. There's a serial killer on the loose. He's killing them in, nasty fashion. And people are scared, as they would be. This is taking place in the D.C., Virginia, Maryland area. And so naturally, I guess, a task force is put together.
Right.
Describe this task force.
Well, basically, the task force is composed of detectives from each jurisdiction where the killer has struck. So you have several different jurisdictions, sheriffs, investigators, detectives, and, of course, Karen Vail, the profiler. And there's, in any kind of situation where you put a bunch of people together, you're going to have different opinions. And naturally, reflecting the research that I'd done all those years ago about the some detectives having issues with the credibility, their perceived credibility, and their lack of knowledge relative to profiling and behavioral analysis and what it actually does. And, of course, perpetuating that poor perception of what it is were these TV shows from years ago, Profiler and Millennium, which had nothing to do with real profiling.
Yeah. The profiling that you talk about and describe in your book is, I would like to say, a lot less sensational than what we've seen.
Absolutely.
And it's a tool. It's a new tool. It's an inexact science, which is still being refined.
It's absolutely still being refined. They keep adding to the database as they learn more information. Thinking changes, but the core is still there. And it's uncanny in its ability, I think. Look, nothing is 100% accurate.
Sure.
But it is an important tool in the arsenal of trying to find these killers.
And I think that you've helped the science along with the book, with an extremely appealing heroine hero, and I think it's on its way. The book is The Seventh Victim. The author is Alan Jacobson. This is Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.